Welcome to Campfire Academy. I'm Andrew Craissati. Today, we're talking about investor relations beyond earnings and with examples like strategy, innovation, and customer spotlights.
So first off, why should investor updates highlight strategy and innovation and not just financials?
We're going to talk about strategy, innovation, happy customers, not just financials. The question is why? Well, if you are talking to your shareholders or your prospective shareholders, whether they are retail investors or institutional investors, they are interested operationally in your business because the operations will help inform what the future looks like and how your current performance is tracking. So the investor wants to understand, albeit to a reasonable level of detail, your strategies, the role of innovation or R&D in your company, and they want to get into more of a granular understanding of your company, and so as to help shed more light on what is your company and what are its prospects. So strategy does not mean you disclose sensitive information. Strategy simply means you give a sense of what your strategic approach is, what your tactical approach is towards your business, towards your product or products, and the role that innovation plays. You may be a company that is heavily focused on innovation and technology as the core activity of your business. Or you may be arguing that innovation is actually relatively immaterial to your business. But making those points across so as to help explain your P&L, to explain your balance sheet, that's the importance of highlighting areas of strategy and innovation. You may also be trying to talk a little bit about how you are competitively differentiated from other companies who are in your peer group. Bringing that to life requires a discussion that is more than financial. It is highlighting some of the granular details of your business and just exactly how you are differentiated. So, yes, you should be talking about strategy. Yes, you should be talking about innovation if it is relevant. And in today's world, you are particularly talking about AI and what AI means to your organization.
What kinds of customer stories are valuable for investor updates?
So when you think about the strategy around customers and what makes for a happy customer for your organization, let's talk a little bit about what type of story is actually relevant or valuable for an investor. Well, I think it's fair to say that a lot of public companies, a lot of quoted investment trusts don't necessarily do enough to explain what their product is, who their customer is, and why their customer picks them and not some other organization. So the first thing that you've got to do in talking about a customer story is making sure the audience understands your product, understands therefore precisely who your customers are, why they are picking you, and that is brought to life by perhaps hearing from the customers directly. If you are a business-to-business solution provider, if you are a business-to-consumer solution provider, this will become clear by understanding your product and understanding your customers. So ideally, maybe we want to hear from some of your customers. What are their testimonials? What do they think of your product? Whether those thoughts are very positive in nature or a blend of positive but where improvements could be found, let's bring that to life and let's allow your audience to really understand who your customers are. They might even know someone who is a customer of yours. So the more they can understand you, the more they can relate to you and relate, therefore, to your financial outcomes.
And what kind of stories help investors see a company's long-term value more clearly?
So, having talked a little bit about customer stories and success stories, are those the only stories that you really want to tell that allow an investor perhaps to see what the value is in your stock, whether that is short-term value or long-term value? It may not be. It may be that what you need to be talking about is a mixture of the fact that you already have happy customers and you can talk about them, but now you need to talk about what are your prospects for having happy customers in the future. So a type of story that could be valuable, for example, might be the lifetime value of a customer. How long is a customer going to be your customer? Are they buying from you on a very transactional basis, where their value to you is limited in time? Or are they in fact signing up for a 2-year or a 3-year relationship with you, thereby bringing more stability to your business and thereby demonstrating a much higher lifetime value that your customer is representing to you? Also, understanding why a customer is likely to be your customer in the future. Perhaps that is driven by a discussion on technology or on innovation around keeping your product modern, fresh, and contemporary. These stories will help create the impression that the value in your business isn't just the transactional short-term value, but there is a longer-term value to what you're doing. So, for example, for those of our clients who are investment firms, this is a really, really important point that they like to emphasize in working with Campfire for their investors. They manage money and they are investing that money. They are, in some of our clients' instances, building long-term value out of those investments. Value that is realized in 3 to 10 years' time, not just today. So being able to understand that a private equity investment firm is building long-term value has to come across in the narrative that that firm is discussing. And that means you need stories that don't just talk about, we've just invested in this particular business, but rather, we've invested in this particular business for the following reasons, and where those reasons highlight the long-term appreciation that comes out of that investment.
What's the value of the C-suite speaking more granularly about the operations of the business?
As we talk about strategy, as we talk about innovation, we even talk about customers. This is potentially coming from multiple voices within the organization. It may not just be the CEO, it could be others within the suite of C-level executives who are helping to lead the organization. There is a great value in, shall we say, meeting these individuals and hearing them talk about the operations of the business. We want to hear a degree of granularity in what they have to say about the business. It helps build authenticity. It builds the integrity of the tone or the voice with which the company speaks. And it also allows us to build confidence in the overall quality of the leadership team, not merely the credibility of the CEO, him or herself. So there are multiple reasons why you would want to have the voice of the entire C-suite heard, and that granularity in the discussion adds to the integrity with which the company is narratively building a picture of the business and allowing us to understand more about the prospects of the firm by understanding the operations of the firm.
How can executives make these operational stories worth listening to rather than being promotional or even self-serving?
So if we ask the C-suite to talk about the company, we face the risk that the company ends up developing additional stories that are purely self-serving and promotional in nature. And that can actually backfire and be not as helpful to the comms objectives of the company itself. So it's really important that the types of stories that are developed are blended. There may well be some success stories to be proud of and share. But it may also be a story, for example, about a particular challenge that the company has faced and how they overcame that challenge. So a new competitive threat, or given the woes of global issues at the moment, whether that is the Ukraine related or whether that is the price of oil related. How does a company discuss those challenges that impact them, and how do they show that they've overcome those challenges? So stories need to be diverse in nature, and they need to go into different areas of exploration so that we really get a sense of this is a truthful and complete picture that is being created, that focuses on not just the good, but also challenges and how those challenges have been dealt with.
What would be your advice for choosing the right internal voices, such as the CFO, CMO, CEO, etc., to tell these stories?
Let's dive a little deeper into this idea of other executives in the company talking to investors through Campfire. The first key question is, who's the right person to talk? Is there a perfect voice? Should there be multiple voices? In creating audio content, the first thing is that if you have more than one voice in a Campfire audio episode, those voices need to sound differentiated so that there is no confusion on the ear as to perhaps two people having a discussion and having difficulty in following the discussion. So the voices themselves need to sound differentiated. You will also want to think about the role of diversity in how you create communications. You may want to have different genders, you may want to have different ages, you may want to show that your policies around diversity are actually implemented through your communication strategy as well. Thirdly, you also want your voices to be experts. You want them to be able to speak with conviction and with authority on whatever the topic is, whether it is the technology roadmap, it is customer success and keeping customers happy, whether it is the chief marketing officer talking about promotional and marketing strategies in different communities around the world. Whatever the focus of conversation is, the person needs to be the expert person on that domain, on that subject matter. We also do emphasize the importance of training for those individuals. We work a lot with our clients on coaching the individuals so that there is a professionalism, there is a sense of comfort in listening to that person speak, right? So the idea of a monotone voice is something that we also look out for and we want to help our clients work around. So creating an experience that feels intimate, that feels engaging, and that feels authentic. Those are the key things in terms of picking the right voices internally.
What would you say the investor relation teams often misunderstand about mixing financial and narrative content?
So when we think about discussions on strategy or innovation or customer relationships and their successes, it's important to understand what is the alignment between these conversations and this content and the notion of financial results, financial forecasts, quarterly or annual outcomes. Well, obviously there is a correlation. The discussion on strategy, innovation is part of what informs the financial picture that is created by quarterly results. When we look at the profit and loss statement of a business and we go to what most people euphemistically refer to as the back page of the financial presentation, where the results are most commonly highlighted and discussed, those are typically discussed in financial terms, with a lack of context, with a lack of nuance. They're very straightforward, dry, brief discussions, very cautiously prepared, and very much mindful of liability in that discussion. So when we are talking about strategy and innovation, or we're talking about operational matters, we shouldn't be divorcing that conversation from what actually takes place each quarter. They are complementary. But the key thing to understand is that complementary relationship is symbiotic. They each feed off each other. The financial discussion benefits from the supplemental conversations you're creating of a more granular or operational or abstract nature, and vice versa. So there is an alignment that needs to take place between the two, while at the same time keeping them separate. So the narrative that comes out quarterly is driven by statute, it's driven by applicable law, it's driven by compliance, it's driven by the advisors guiding you on what you should be discussing, and the tone with which you deliver that information. But building context around it is where the audio Campfire delivered experience can be extremely impactful in adding more of an explanation or a narrative as to the why or the how of the financial position that your company is in.
And could you share a specific example about an organization who's done a great job telling a story about innovation, or a customer spotlight of some kind, any kind of impact that this had on investor sentiment?
So let's try and think about some real-world examples of how stories on innovation or a customer spotlight actually impact the intended audience. One of the industries that's really vulnerable to general sentiment is retail banking. So what in England we would refer to as the high street bank. They are organizations that have a tendency to have a quite complex relationship with their shareholders, and with their customer base, and with the retail investor as well. The bank in the high street in the UK is a creature that has a very powerful position in society, but it is sometimes accused of certain types of behavior that the general public don't necessarily like, or that investors don't feel are ideal. And that is often because banks talk in a dry financial way, and they don't bring to life the good that they can bring to society. Banks don't talk about loans to small communities. They don't talk about housing loans in villages where there is a paucity of income and where there are challenges at a society level. The employee in a branch of a bank regularly goes home at the end of the day to face negative sentiment from their partner, their family, their friends over a beer in the pub. There's a discussion of, quite literally, why would you work for an employer like that? So you may have an organization that is very well performing financially, but that has a mixed message in terms of its brand or the industry that it is in. And that is where an exceptional communication strategy can overcome that challenge. I was speaking recently with a friend of mine who was a CEO of one of the major banks in the UK, a major retail bank. And at the time that he was CEO, Campfire didn't exist, and there was no ability to talk through audio products like this and communicate directly with an investor base, or equally with the employees of the organization internally. And he was telling me how he wished that a product like Campfire existed in his day, because he knew that he had a point that he was trying to make. And he believed firmly that he was someone who could communicate effectively in overcoming the perception that his industry suffered from. And he needed a tool that he could use where he could literally be in the ears of his intended audience and talk convincingly and with passion and conviction about why they shouldn't be thought of negatively the way the general public perceive the industry. So banking is a great example in that regard. The other area where I think they would benefit from doing something like this is in the manufacturing of aircraft. So the aviation sector in general does not always get good coverage, whether by investors or analysts or by the press. So being able to talk more intimately and to get your point of view across without the interference of an analyst or a journalist would be very impactful for an industry that in general, like aviation or like manufacturing of aircraft, allows you to therefore control your narrative and get the points across that would be more beneficial to you if you could actually achieve that.
So what else should listeners be considering as they start putting these insights into practice?
So as we talk about strategy, innovation, and all these other areas of a sort of more granular internal nature, I think it's important that anyone listening to this episode reflect on the idea that you need to control your narrative. Relying on purely the creation of quarterly results announcements, so heavily crafted by the influence of other folk, is ultimately going to be detrimental in how you control your narrative and how you control your story. What that means in real terms is that if you don't stay in control of your narrative, others will do it for you. And if those others are perhaps journalists or they are analysts, they will then interpret your business based on what they see, not what they know. And it's incredibly important that you are therefore able to have a channel by which you can create your narrative and get it directly across to your intended audience, rather than relying on intermediaries who may challenge or dispute the narrative that you're otherwise telling. This has been Campfire Academy, an Auddy production. To learn more about how you can capture investor attention and stay top of mind, visit auddy.com.